Oh.
Savvy, mana nih?
Plan Commission. We're opening today's meeting Tuesday, May 23rd. And starting with the roll call.
Bruce,
Here.
Erdman Hermans,
Present.
Harp,
Here.
Haniro,
Here.
Schaefer,
Here.
Summers,
Here.
and Mayor Kuhn is present.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Schaefer, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
I had a question, and it's about contingency number 5, which, thank you for numbering them, and it refers to the entire development. If you scroll down to the next page.
Is it?
Maybe it was-
Perfect. There's a lot of discussion last time. Okay.
I think it was with regard to the, the heck is it now? Maybe it's further on. Anyway, the motion involved doing is, oh, I see. It's on page 4 of the document. I never know if I always refer to the number. Keep going. There you go. Okay, number 5. So it says city engineer approval of a comprehensive stormwater management plan for the entire development. And my question just was, does entire development refer to the whole property or just the area being developed in phase 1? What is that understood to be?
I would take that to mean the entire development, all phases, but I find that a bit troubling because what was being submitted for consideration was just the first phase, which isn't even anticipated to start until 2025. So there is a possibility that they would never move forward with the future phases.
But in that case, would it be the first phase and the existing structures, including a parking lot? Whatever it is, I think at some point that needs to be clarified. And
That certainly does, because at the time that the original project was developed, they likely were not under the same stormwater requirements that they have now. So are they being required to be brought into compliance for the entire site? Is it just new impervious surface added? Are they meeting redevelopment standards or new development standards? That I don't know. We will get that clarified before the second reading at Common Council.
thank you.
I think though that the future development was presented to us as the concept plan. One of the approval of the first building was on the presumption of what was going to happen with the rest of the property. So I don't see this as just a standalone, we had enough issues with the building alone, but it was couched within the concept of that whole structure. So I don't know that you could hold them accountable to the stormwater, but I think the plan was always would reflect the fact as they did present, there's going to be 3 buildings and one old building, and then all this green space. So that was a concept that was there. So I don't know specifically the answer to this, but to say that they only presented the building was not really quite.
That is all that they sought rezoning for. That is all that we noticed
Just
in the
that
hearing,
building.
and that is all that was approved.
Okay.
This is the type of contingency we normally would place on a GIP for a multi-phase project. But that's when they're requesting the rezoning at one time for a multi-phase project. So I will need to get some clarity. Mark reviewed that item, and we will be sure we figure it out
No,
before the
That
council.
makes sense too.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in addition, Alder Hanira also emailed over some minor revisions to the minutes that I'm displaying on the screen now. So if we make a motion, this should also probably be included in that.
Well, that's like mud.
Can you all see those?
Yep.
Try and zoom in a little.
I would consider that a friendly amendment to the motion.
And agree as a second.
Okay, great. So moved by Bruce and seconded by Schaefer with the amendments for the updates. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so next is the public hearing. We do see some folks on here. So the public hearing, it says 7 PM request for rezoning from planned development districts specifics implementation plan to PDD general implementation plan or GIP Greenway mixed use development 8309 8313 Greenway Boulevard. And if some of the staff can help me, if anyone has their hand raised, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, yeah, and I believe Joe Lee and Steve Doran and the whole team is on as well. So if there are any questions during this time, they're also able to answer any questions.
Are you opening the public hearing at 7:06 PM?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and if anyone is on the Zoom that would like to talk or give their comments, please raise your hand or unmute and let us know.
Will we have a presentation by the applicant or staff?
I think that's the next
I see.
agenda item.
I see.
if
Very
that's
good.
Yeah,
okay.
it's just a public hearing part.
All right, hearing no interest, can we go ahead and close it?
Yes.
Thank you for your patience. Next on the agenda item is the request for rezoning, from Planned Development District, PDD, Specific Implementation Plan to PDD General Implementation Plan, GIP Greenway Mixed Use Development 8309 and 8313 Greenway Boulevard. And this is where I'll let staff take it away.
Sure, yeah. So as I said before, the team is here. They do have a presentation with some updated imagery for Plan Commission to look at, and I have that prepared. Otherwise, we did look at something very similar, I believe in October of 2022. That one, had that drive-through. And after listening to Plan Commissioner feedback, they've gotten rid of that. And so this is their updated schematic without the drive-through. So yeah, I'll turn it over now to the development team.
Steve, do you want to say anything or do you want me to go right into it?
No, I think you can kind of just go right into it and talk about the project. That'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. My name is Joe Lee with JLA Architects. Who you just heard there was Steve Doran with Galway Companies. Daphne or Abby, do we have to go through yours or can I present?
Oh, yeah, you can
Something
definitely
on my
share
screen.
yours.
It's
Yeah.
the same info. Okay, thank you. I'll do that if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Pardon me. So can everybody see my screen now?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Okay, thank you. As Daphne said, we've been before this body a few months ago with a concept plan, which was slightly different than this, but not altogether different in its scope and scale and density. Just how the site was organized, and the biggest difference, as she said, was we were trying to get a national restaurant, which required a drive-through, and getting that to work on the site wasn't as successful or as planning or the plan commission would have wanted it. So we relooked at that, took your comments into consideration, and I think we've addressed all of them as pushing the building up to the street, getting rid of the sidewalk, engaging both Greenway Boulevard and John Q. Hammond's Drive. So this is the updated plan. I'll run through it quickly. I mean, we do have some updated imagery as well. The site here is on the corner of, obviously you can see here, the south west corner of Greenway and John Q. Hammond's. The site currently has a couple of office buildings which will be disappearing on the site, and we're going to develop a high quality mixed use development, 7 levels with ground floor commercial, retail at about 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. That'll get flushed out as the design progresses, and multifamily apartment units above. And right now we're sitting at about 240 units. We see that probably flexing a little bit depending on how we tweak the unit mix and unit sizes a bit, but it will be give or take 240 units. As you can see here, this is the ground floor or level 1 here, which is at grade with Greenway and John Q. Hammond's. We have a section to cut through here that really can help explain this a little bit. We do have 2 levels of covered parking or structured parking, one on the ground level and 1 level above. What's nice about this site is there's grade as you come to the west and up the west side, the grade rises, and we can take advantage of that and get another level of parking. We have access easements in place with the neighboring property for that. So it's worked out really well. We've met with the fire department, and they actually gave us a great kudos that they really didn't have any comments for us. Everything looks good. So we're pretty confident that we're dotting our I's or crossing our T's as far as access goes. The first level of parking, the ground level, would be off of John Q. Hammond's here. And that is masked or screened from John Q. Hammond's with activated spaces. I'll slip to another floor plan here. You can see it a little bit better. So the gray is the parking on the first level, and then all the colored are occupied spaces that mask or screen the parking levels from the public realm, Greenway Boulevard and John Q. Hammond. So yellow is multifamily, blue is commercial retail, and red is the multifamily entry and amenity spaces. So it's going to have a really nice street presence on Greenway Boulevard and John Q. Hammond's with that corner retail on the corner. The section cut here really emphasizes how we're doing that with the 2 levels of parking. Greenway Boulevard's on our right here. We have that commercial retail is a double height space or 2 level volume. So it's going to be a really nice, attractive commercial element. And then we have 5 levels of apartments above. So it is a 7 level structure. The grade does go up from north to south and east to west. So part of that lowest level will be concealed underground for part of the site. Again, this is the first floor where we have the residential entry on the northwest side. We also have a service drive where there'll be refuse pickup, move-ins, that kind of thing. So that'll be off the street, out of the way. Like I said, we have the double height commercial space, and then we have John Q. Hammond's activated with multifamily or residential units on this side as well. As we go up to the second level, here's where that second level of parking comes in off of the adjacent parking lot. Again, we have common amenity spaces on the northwest, the double height retail, and then additional units. We haven't decided if those will be two-story units or if they'll be single level units that are just stacked on one another. That'll get flushed out as we progress through design. And then up above on the third floor, we have a U-shaped building mass that's open to the south to maximize the amount of natural light that comes in to that area with a nice occupied roof deck. I should mention that there's some additional indoor amenity space right here. I'll highlight that for you so it's easier to read. There we go. So in addition to the outdoor roof deck, which, you know, has to be designed yet, we'll have some indoor common amenity space like a club room or fitness, and even a screen porch, and a outdoor pool to the south of that. And that's on the third level. And then as we go up on the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh floors, we just have multifamily units that complete that U shape. We have some updated architectural imagery. Going for really simple and sleek, modern or contemporary architectural aesthetic with blocks of, you know, minimizing the number of exterior materials. It is, you know, a 7-story fairly large building. So we need some variation, but, you know, we don't need 17 different materials, right? So the idea is to break up the composition of the elevations with blocks of color and blocks of material that are consistent throughout. So you'll see we have a strong masonry base here, and then we have 3 different colors of siding, maybe a wood tone, and a couple of hues of gray, just to give it a little more dynamic depth in the elevations there. A lot of glass, large windows. That's very important in the design as well. And you can see the retail area on the corner here, a lot of glass, double height space. And we're going to work in a retail plaza as well for some outdoor activity on the corner there. Here's another shot. This is Greenway Boulevard. You can see how that composition of the massing is broken up in the distribution of the different materials and colors. And last but not least, we have some 2-dimensional elevations. So just to give you an idea of what we're thinking is the material palette right now. What you see here is the lighter material would be a masonry, a brick material. And then the brownish tan material would be a wood tone, wood grain siding. And then the gray would be either a panel type siding in a panel format, or horizontal lap siding. We're still looking at the different options for that. So as we come forward again with more information at subsequent submittals, we'll have that all figured out. But the aesthetic is generally what the aesthetic we're after. So Steve, I don't know if you think I missed anything. If so, please add. Otherwise, I'm ready to answer any questions or take any comments.
No, I think that hit everything, Joe. Thanks.
Joe, you said at the beginning, this John Schaefer, that you're taking away the sidewalk on the front. You're not taking away the sidewalk, right? There's still a sidewalk on Greenway.
Yep, yes,
I
yeah.
think you took away.
Did I say that? I'm sorry if I did, yeah.
I wanna
Nope,
make-
there's still sidewalk. I'm gonna go back to the plan here.
Yeah,
This is the first floor, yeah.
I saw it when
I'm
you
gonna
said
zoom in
that.
a little bit.
yeah, I didn't know what you meant.
Yeah, so this is the sidewalk here,
Yeah. Okay.
8-foot sidewalk, and then we have this hatched area is a plaza patio that would be for the retail space. And, you know, we still have to work out the landscape and hardscape plan for the rest of the site, but that's the concept.
Just clarification.
Thank you. That was good. I caught that too, and I was worried. You got me.
Boy, I don't remember saying that, but I'm sorry if I did.
No worries, no worries. We're all good. Did you have?
Yeah, Joe and Steve both, I just wanted to thank you for revising your proposal. I think it's very attractive, and I think it does exactly what we were hoping would happen.
Mhm.
Just a couple of quick questions for staff, maybe. Joe's indicating that the unit count is still somewhat flexible. Is there a maximum that's allowed within this
Yeah,
GDP application?
so for the rezoning, we noticed it, I believe, at 249 units. So that is the maximum. It sounds like they're gonna be, you know, within that if they're hovering around 240. Yeah.
And the signage that's shown, I know that the images are really preliminary, and obviously the signage is preliminary, but we're not taking any action on signage at this point, correct?
No.
Joe, were you okay with all the conditions of approval?
This is Steve. I just have one quick question relative to the total number of units. I guess I was unaware that 249 was the maximum. Is that, can you explain to me the process if for some reason we were able to fit more than 249 units?
Oh,
Could that be just updated with the SIP when you come in?
so,
Oh,
Go
I
ahead,
was just
Abby.
gonna say, I just pulled up the hearing notice and it looks like it was noticed with a maximum height of 5 stories, including structured parking.
okay.
So I think if you were, as long as you don't exceed that maximum height.
Was already 2 stories. above.
Yeah, we're at 7.
Wait, am I looking at the wrong?
It says 5-story mixed use and then including structured parking. That was how it was.
Does that mean below it?
That sounds like
Yeah.
5 stories with the parking included.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, that's
Oh.
how it sounds.
Plus. would
Yeah,
be-
even our early concepts were the 7 level.
I think maybe there's just some clarification in the language that might be necessary. I don't know whether that could be handled with a revised GDP and SIP submittal at one time.
But does that mean you have to redo the public hearing? Get all these people back again?
Based on what I am looking at here, I believe that we would, because the way that the hearing is written is the purpose of the proposed rezoning is to replace the existing 2 2-story office buildings with a single 5-story mixed-use building, including structured parking. So I would not, if I were to get this notice in the mail, I would assume that some of the levels of that 5 are structured parking, not that.
Yeah, that's all.
Mhm, Right.
So I think that we will need to renotice this one. My apologies.
Would
Can-
that be done, Abby, with the SIP though?
I would say that you can receive feedback from the Plan Commission this evening, but I would recommend against any action to recommend approval from the Plan Commission this evening, so they can provide feedback on the submittal. But I don't think that it would be advisable for the Plan Commission to take any action on the GIP. I don't think we could take it forward to the Common Council.
Could they, at that time, then perhaps modify the unit count as well to take into account Steve's concerns?
Yes, we could include that as well in the notice.
And I believe we do have a 5th Tuesday for this month. So if we set it, at this meeting, would we be able to get it on the next meeting?
Or yes, we could just administratively, our staff could go ahead and send the notice to the newspaper by the deadline, and then we could have this, like Daphne said, on the agenda for, would it be the 27th?
Is there actually a 5th week meeting? I just thought it was just 1st and 3rd.
No,
Or second and second.
there's an
and fourth.
extra
There's-
Tuesday. There's an extra Tuesday this
That
month that
means
gives
we
us.
have 3 weeks notice
Yes.
from
Oh, But
this.
you still have to call a non-normal meeting.
No, I
We
think- I
we
think
could
there's-
just
You can do it as part of this.
administratively, I think our staff has the ability to just administratively set the hearing
okay.
for
Yeah, I got it.
June 27th. I think what Daphne is pointing out is
I
there's,
see. You're talking about June.
yes.
I would actually go one further and say that the action you're taking based on the request for rezoning is to find that the notice was deficient and you want to set a new hearing. I don't see anything wrong with that under the action item. I mean, it's entirely compatible with the determination that there was an error with the notice. I mean, that would be I don't see any problem with that.
Absolutely.
So,
Couldn't that be done on the 13th?
but we will have set the hearing by then. It will be, I mean, it's just the practical action coming out of this meeting is that there's the determination that there was an error with the hearing and you'd like to have a new hearing. So you might as well just, schedule that hearing for the 27th right now.
And Commissioner Erdman Hermans, to answer your question, we are required to run the notice in the newspaper 2 times. And the second notice has to appear 1 week prior to the hearing. So we would not be able to make it for the June 13th, but we could get it on for June 27th.
Got it.
Okay. Is there any other clarifying questions?
Just comments, because I
Alder
won't be here when this is all finally gets done. But I think I agree with Randy, to you guys, that I think, thank you for fixing what I think were some serious issues with this project. And I like much better what's there. If I had only one comment that said it looks like about 100 other apartment buildings I've seen. And I was hoping someone would come up with some radical different way of what a building might look like, but that's an aesthetic thing. That's not my judgment to call, but I think it looks great. I did have one question. You have 1st and 2nd floor parking, but it looks like to get to one floor to the other, you have to go outside the building and around the block to get to the second. Is that correct? There's no ramp inside the parking garage?
That is correct, yes.
You don't see that as an issue or a problem?
No.
Okay.
No, because the residents will be directed as to what levels they are not able to park on. So we won't have resident that's in unit 215 that can park in the lower level and the upper level. They'll be designated to be upper level parking only, for example.
Got it.
Alder Haniro.
I had some questions for staff. So on page 6 of 22, which is also numbered page 16, under parking. And this is just a question of should versus will. So in the parking paragraph, it talks about, the 2 levels of parking that Commissioner Schaefer just brought up. But it also says the entrance to the 2nd floor parking should only be accessible by residents. So I guess my question is this direction to the developer, or because it seems to me it should say will be to address the concern that was just raised.
Yeah, so this was more directed towards the developers, if they're thinking of allowing, residents to park on both levels. It's just kind of more of a suggestion for them to consider. And then, if plan commissioners found any issues with the parking situation, then this could be added as a contingency or something along those lines.
Okay, so as part of the contingency, which I know we're not approving tonight, but it isn't just that the resolution of all staff recommendations in the plan set will be incorporated. It's also what's in this analysis document, the staff report.
Most of the staff report are just things that are being pointed out. So if you wanted to add, those things from the staff report in, I would add those as contingency specifically.
Well, I will look to my fellow commissioners to see if anyone wants to do that. And then also I'll just note that on page 17, and I use a Mac, so maybe it's just me, but the notes, the staff notes on page 17 many of them are garbled in the conversion to PDF.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that happens sometimes when we import things into other programs and all of that. But the developers have the copy that has all the correct notes and all of that.
Okay.
As far as the 2 levels of parking and the individual entrances to those 2 levels, I don't have any problem with it. I think they'll be able to manage. The building will be able to manage that fine. Be able to provide directions to people. I did agree that the commercial parking should be identified as available to the public, and I assume that will happen as part of the signage package.
I mean, that is a concern because there's no outside parking.
Yeah.
Right.
Anywhere around here, and you're putting
Yeah,
a commercial building.
I would totally
It's gotta be
drive by
something.
it and not be like,
Where do I park?
place
Oh
to
my
park.
We will absolutely have signage indicating that the commercial parking can be accessible along John Q. Hammond's.
God. Okay.
Yeah, there's a building that I go to downtown Madison that has this kind of parking, and I only know because I've gotten, the first time I went, I got lost and went out like upstairs and just kept walking. Not that will happen in this one, but now that I've used it 3 times, I know exactly where to go, and I park quick and I leave. So I have full faith in this design. Now, since the notice was it insufficient or had error?
Sufficient.
We're deferring to the June 27th meeting. Do I have a motion for deferral?
I have a suggested motion if
Thank
you
you.
don't mind, Mayor. The motion to reschedule the hearing on the GIP amendment for June 27th at 7 PM for the purpose of clarifying the proposed height of the building.
Excellent. Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I made that motion.
Thank you. And do I have a second? I'll
John,
second.
you'll get a chance at it again at council anyway, so.
Yeah, well.
I think I heard Commissioner Summers second.
Second.
Awesome.
the motion will be different.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those
Yeah,
in favor?
Gretchen, Erdman Hermans.
Oh,
I just want to point out that if anybody has a concern with the 7 stories, that we should bring it up now to them while they have time to consider any feedback. I personally don't have a problem with the 7 stories.
thank you for that, Commissioner Erdman. I am fine with it, especially in the Greenway Station area. Do I have any other concerns? Okay.
No, I just think from historically, we always talked about east of the belt line and west of the belt line, because again, Greenway, there are other buildings, so that's long ago. That's a horse that's gone out of the, whatever that analogy is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine with 7. A lot bigger than that might be a problem.
Thank you for that. All those in favor of the,
Rescheduling the hearing.
thank you, rescheduling the hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to specific implementation plan, SIP modification for deck at 66 19th North Chickahawk Trail. Staff, do you have some comments?
Yes, so this is before you today. Typically, decks are not in front of Plan Commission, but this is in a plan development district. And at the time, they did not present a plan with setbacks or encroachments of any kind. And so any, enlarging of, their property or changing the exterior of their property requires an SIP modification. So that's why this deck is here. There increasing it from about an 8 by 8 foot deck to a 16 by 16 foot deck. So it's quite an increase, but as you can see from the setbacks, it's away from the road, which is where the utilities are. It's not in any easements. So I was recommending approval as a minor SIP modification.
This is Hanira. I'll make a motion to approve the SIP modification.
Do I have a second?
Erdman Herman, second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just had a question when I didn't get to the site, but I Googled it. There's a lot of green space to the west of that. Is that just open public space? Is that water retention space? What's the?
I believe it is just like open space that doubles as retention. I know that area is the grade change very
Yeah, I mean,
significantly.
my
So
sense is that you could keep going forever and there's nothing there. But
I can tell you because I walked that with my dog. That's a really steep hill with two series of retaining walls.
Mhm.
So that just goes into basically a hill. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think because of that, I don't think that's any buildable space at all. Yeah.
All right, so any other comments or suggestions? All right, all those in favor of modification of the deck, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is the design review revisions for some pump shed and outdoor storage at 2410 Parview Road.
Yes. So for this, the applicants are wanting to move some of their existing storage to the outside. So they'll be replacing about 5 or 6 parking stalls with the storage area, and then to just keep it away from anyone from walking by to just get into it. They're putting a fence around it. We would consider this not a perimeter fence because it's not going surrounding the perimeter of any portion of this property. And so because of that, we do allow perimeter or non-perimeter fences to go above our typical 6 feet in height. And they've already lowered the height from suggestion from staff from 12-foot fence to an 8-foot tall fence. And then I believe the applicants are also here on the Zoom, and they can answer any additional questions.
Hi, my name is John Riley. I'm with Sullivan Design Build, representing the architect and contractor on this project. And with me is Dwayne Elke, who is the facility manager for Stam Pumps. Happy to answer any questions and do whatever we can to help here.
All right, so hearing no clarifying questions, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I would second as long as it has the condition about the stormwater and river.
Oh,
stuff
yes.
in there.
Thank you.
All right. Any discussion? Besides the change?
No,
Okay. Hearing none.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to note, so the easements that are referred to in the recommendation are both for storm sewer and rail.
in rail, yeah.
Yes, and we have, documentation of it from, when this property was first developed. It's just never been, I guess, recorded with the city. So we're just asking for,
Recording.
yeah.
Verification.
Okay. And we can sure do that. I may reach out to you just for some of that exact information, and then we will work to get it recorded as you're requesting.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we just have to look through all the documentation to find all of that.
To me, it's not an issue with the plan. I just want to
Right.
reconcile.
Sure. Understood. Thank you.
Very good. So thank you for that. So all those in favor of the design review revisions, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is the zoning ordinance rewrite project, update, initial discussion, direction regarding key policy issues. So I will let staff lead us on this.
Thank you, Mayor Kuhn. At long last. We have been working on this zoning ordinance project for a couple of years. And it is finally at the point where we can begin to unveil it. We had still some policy issues we wanted to discuss based on guidance provided by an informal work group, which consisted of Randy Bruce representing the Plan Commission, Justin Ballwig from our Zoning Board of Appeals, and Spencer Schumacher, who represented the interests of sustainability. He was originally on the Sustainability Committee, the chairperson, and he continued representing those interests as we met over the last couple of years. And I want to thank the three of them for spending quite a few hours with us on this. It was a project team approach to this discussion. I won't repeat what was in my memo, it just was intended to provide a background on how we got here and emphasizing the actions in the comprehensive plan that fed into the zoning ordinance rewrite. What we wanted you to focus on tonight was what's on the screen, the policy decision guides that pertain to part 1 and part 2. The zoning code is about 250 pages as drafted. It's currently being reviewed with our city attorney, and it's divided into 2 parts. And so if it's all right with the commission, I thought we would just go through these in sequence. And I'll just summarize them briefly, assuming that you've that you've reviewed the material ahead of time. So the first item was our current code focused on lot coverage, which was never really well defined, kind of vague. It wasn't really an appropriate substitute for impervious surface area. It was really just referred to the bulk of a building and not ground coverage as much for the purpose of stormwater management. So what we are proposing is to have an impervious surface ratio standard. The work group liked this idea, and you can see in green that we have proposed various standards, and these are the ones listed for multifamily, medium urban and high, industrial and mixed use, neighborhood, avenue, urban and downtown. And then here's some examples of recent planned development districts. Almost all fall in the 50 to 80% range for impervious surface area. Conservancy Bend is 92%. And then you see the definition there. So I guess with each of these, I thought it would be good to pause and see if there's any reaction. Or Randy, if you had anything to add from a work group perspective.
I don't think so. The only question I had, Mark, was other than looking at the PUDs, have these percentages been compared to other jurisdictions or city of Madison standards, or how does this compare? I guess when we get to the lower medium or multifamily residential medium at 75% seems a bit high to me.
Okay.
The others, I would say, just offhand look okay. But
Commissioner Roos, I'll respond by saying that the initial draft of the code is based on a template used by our consultant, Vanderwall Associates, from their work with other communities. Obviously, we have been working to tailor this to address Middleton's concerns, interests, and needs. So I don't have a specific answer for you as to why numbers are 75 versus 80%, other than that they are based on the consultant's experience in other communities. I'd be happy to look into it a little further, specifically to compare with Madison, if you'd like me to. I can, that's a good question. And I just, we are relying on the consultant's expertise here for guidance.
Exactly. And I agree with that approach. I just want to make sure that we weren't in the lower density multifamily, we weren't over saturating a site.
I mean, that is very much, we all remember very vividly the flooding that we had, and we don't want to do anything that is going to exacerbate flooding. We want to make sure that stormwater management, that there's ample room for stormwater management on site. So, or in a regional detention facility, if that's necessary. We have Vanderwall did specifically look at those 12 other PDD projects and I don't remember which ones they were, but they were various ones that we've approved over the years that were similar to these categories. Abby, did you? Yeah.
Just really quickly, I wanted to mention the reason that Conservancy Bend is so much higher is because they manage their stormwater below grade in a cistern.
That's a good point.
Could you elucidate the MUD 100%?
You're wanting some information about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's our downtown. So I think that's, you know,
Zero lot line.
pardon me?
Zero lot line.
Right, zero, yeah, exactly, zero lot line. So we have development in our downtown that is completely occupies the site. There isn't any pervious area. So that's where that 100% comes from.
Okay, so those sites just rely on running into the storm drains entirely.
Well, or unless there's an arrangement for, which is preferred, obviously, if we were developing downtown from scratch, we wouldn't have that type of design. But we have the redevelopment that's taken place in downtown Middleton has been on impervious sites for almost all cases. I can only think of one property where there's now more pervious, and that was the removal of the Hamid site next to Freehouse. So that now is a vacant lot that is pervious. But otherwise, I can't think of any projects, even the Middleton Center projects, those were there was very minimal stormwater management opportunity or infiltration opportunity with the sites preceding that redevelopment.
Does the 100% indicate that there could be a building with no setbacks on all sides?
Yes, well, I'd have to look up the setbacks for that district, but
Stormwater management.
or there's parking and loading areas too.
Yeah.
I don't off the top of my head have that one memorized again. It's been a while since I've looked at the setbacks, but I mean, I can look it up quickly if you'd like.
No, that's fine.
We can get you.
The ISR, we will still have building setbacks. The ISR isn't the only control.
Right.
Yeah, very good.
So can I ask a question? Just, I'm a musician, not a mathematician, but ratios are not percentages. And you say you want to put this in ratios, but all I see are percentages. And they're not the same. And so I'm trying to understand what the percentage is. 100% would mean a ratio of 1 to 1. And doesn't mean a 0 to 100. So I'm trying to, your percentages is what you're really talking. When you say 75%, it means 75% of the area is impervious. But that's a ratio of 3 to 1. That's not so you use the word ratio and that just confused me because ratios are not percentages.
The first sentence I agree would read better if it had been written as instead use a maximum impervious surface area for each zoning district. I would agree that that's a better.
I was just trying to sort through the ratio as a word.
Yeah, no, that's.
And then you never really said, does that mean you have to have 100% impervious or 100% non-impervious? And you don't say that, your statement doesn't really clarify that either.
Okay, that's good.
This is why we want
thinking ratios.
Okay.
It's a good clarifying, and I appreciate it before it goes, further on. Did you have something to say, Alder Hernira?
I have some questions on this one. So if I understand how do I want to approach this? So just because we would say that it's okay in the downtown to have 100% impervious surface, that doesn't, wouldn't we still want for redevelopment, wouldn't we want new developments to do something like have a green roof? And how does that fit in? Is that just handled on the stormwater management side? Or is that going to be captured in the zoning code?
Good question.
That's the same question. Curious.
Because I could see grandfathering in all the existing property.
Yeah.
Development, I would think we would want them to do things differently.
We do have later on, we did discuss incentives for affordable housing and stormwater management. So I think that's where we could explore that further. From a staff standpoint, we fully support that idea, obviously. From a zoning standpoint, stormwater management is related to zoning, but it's, you know, it's also its own animal. So,
Right, and I guess just to add, under the current standards, there are two different types of stormwater requirements that the city administers. One is greenfield development, where they have to meet the whole minimum threshold for 3 different criteria of stormwater. And then if it's a redevelopment site and it already has a lot of impervious surface, there are still requirements for redevelopment, but it's a lower threshold that is required for the developer to meet. So I would not think that we would be proposing to change that. It's just that if somebody did want to develop on a downtown property and use the 0 lot line that is currently permitted in our zoning ordinance now under B4, they would have to use like underground stormwater management, green roofs, and other
Collection.
standards to be able to meet that redevelopment threshold.
Okay, thanks.
and to answer the question about setbacks, the minimum front setback is 0 feet, maximum setback of 10 feet in a downtown district. Minimum side setback is 0 for an interior side setback. Obviously, that means not another street frontage. Minimum rear setback is 10 feet. So there is a minimum rear setback requirement. Maximum building height of 60 feet or 5 stories. I don't want to go into all the rest of this, but you get the idea.
May I ask a question?
Mhm.
I was still on number 1.
That was number 1 too.
Oh, well, you're talking about setbacks, so I thought you're talking about number 2.
I was
think you're talking
responding
about
to a
the
question.
100%. Does that mean it
100%,
covers
okay.
everything?
All right, thanks.
And he's saying even if it does, you still got to figure out what to do with the water.
Okay. I just had a question about the definition of impervious surface, and I was wondering why pervious pavers would be included since they do infiltrate.
What we have found over the years is that a pervious pavement over time can get clogged if it's not properly maintained. And so we felt it was the more conservative approach to treat it as an impervious surface. Abby, correct, you have a different way of, that's your answer too.
I agree.
Yeah.
The brick pavers in downtown Middleton are pervious, but they have to be vacuum swept annually with like a certain type of equipment that has a brush. And so if we were to allow those types of facilities to count toward the requirements for stormwater management, we might run into an issue down the road where we can't enforce the maintenance that would be required to make them function properly.
It just was the more prudent, cautious approach, I think, is what we felt of this way was.
And I get that. I'm just wondering, doesn't that create a disincentive for developers to use pervious pavers? And is that what we want?
That's a good point.
Because if they're, if it's more expensive and more maintenance, but we still can benefit, I'm not sure we want to discourage people from
Yeah.
using them.
I think that's a very good point.
Why don't we speak with our stormwater engineer about this topic a bit and see if there's something that could protect the city that could be written into the maintenance agreement that they're already going to be
Right.
entering into.
Yeah, you grandfather it in, like I say, if in 2 years the pavement fails and it's no longer impervious, then until at which somebody wants to rezone, rebuild a new building, you're sort of stuck with the reality that you've lost it and you can't make them bring it back. So I see it as draconian, but I think it's a good draconian.
So
A good draconian.
these are very good
Sometimes you gotta do
topics.
that.
I don't mean to be scooting us along. Did you have any more?
Okay.
No,
questions?
that was it for this one.
All right,
I had a
Number
comment
2.
about the green roof, but I think you want that addressed.
later. I
Later
think
on.
that's,
We can talk about that later.
I think that, I'll look at the number while he's talking.
So number 2 pertains to minimum and maximum front setbacks in a mixed use avenue zoning district. And all I was going to say here is that this was kind of a late change to the zoning code. What's underlined in green here at the bottom is the staff would like to consider the use of conditional use permit for potential reduction. What's happened is along University Avenue, there's the right of way varies. And we struggled with how to define a zoning district so that we'd like to ultimately have a fairly uniform street edge. But in some cases, like the Castle Rock Apartments, for example, which you've seen the concept for a few months ago, they have a greater, the lot line is set back farther from the sidewalk than standard. And so because it's pretty cumbersome to vacate surplus right of way and work with the agencies involved to do that, and it varies from property to property, we felt maybe the way to handle this would be through a conditional use approach to look at things on a case by case basis. So that was where that idea came from.
My only concern, Mark, would be that along University Avenue, I know that there's thoughts of extending the bike path, on one or both sides of the road. And I wouldn't want to give up some of that, right? Give up that ability and still have a decent terrace for street trees.
Yeah.
I appreciate that insight.
Yep. And there definitely is ample right of way along most of University Avenue, especially on the north side, as I recall. And actually, this happens to show what Daphne is pointing to here. There's actually an area that is more constrained on the south side by the is that Napa?
Yeah,
it's Napa.
it is.
And the conditional use process will allow for that type of evaluation. I do think it's important, if that's going to be the city's intent, we want to make sure that we address that in our comprehensive plan and specifically our bicycle network plan, if that's the goal, to replace that sidewalk with a wider path.
Can I ask, since I'm new to zoning, if the setback is 15 to 25 feet, when I was reading this, I assumed that was from the street, and I was corrected that there's
It's from a lot. No, well, it's from the lot line, which is typically 6 to 12 inches in from the sidewalk typically, but there are exceptions.
So before the sidewalk, like between the street and the sidewalk, or after the sidewalk?
Between the street curb and the sidewalk is considered part of the street right away. The private property line is on the outside of the sidewalk.
That was my assumption.
Yeah.
Okay. So then going another 15 feet from there is you're probably starting at 20 feet, going to really 30 feet is my guess.
Yeah,
So that makes me feel
if you
better.
walked out of your building, you'd be 15 feet before you hit the sidewalk.
Got it.
Yeah, essentially.
And I don't want to, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, especially this case on your screens, you can see where the sidewalk literally jogs and then the property line.
Right.
So, this is a special case for University Avenue specifically, which is where we're proposing a lot of the MUA. And so because the sidewalk jogs and the right of way also jogs in a lot of areas, we thought this was a good candidate for that CUP. So we would, say like, one of the conditions is you have to be able to properly fit that, larger bike path in the future, and have enough adequate space on either side. So those are kind of the conditions that we were thinking of having, a property have to meet in order to grant that conditional use.
Got
When
it.
as Randy was saying, and others, when we looked at the dentist's office, and there was a lot of concern that it was too far set back, but you look at the properties, like 90% of the properties are set back. And so there's absolutely zero standard in terms of something. And I'm a little concerned about suddenly imposing this notion on a district that is so grandfathered into being uneven and erratic and far from the street that I don't know what to do with it,
I can tell you for my former district in District 4, which is the Lakeview Park part, all the way up to Branch Street, we have an understanding that it'll be redeveloped. And I say we being the people at Doors, they know, because when they lost Sonic and Sonic was closed for so many years, they are welcoming development. So as long as there's some guidance, I think it'll be fine. It'll be more in the middle that might have a little bit different issue.
Yeah, Mark, I think in the University Avenue design guidelines, I thought there was some discussion about a bike path on University Avenue.
There is, I defer to Daphne on that.
Yeah.
I remember we had discussed it, and that was, I believe, one of the recommendations. However, I feel like there were, a lot of contingencies with that because of some of, like, that one repair shop, that the lots are a lot narrower as well. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, so any other comments about minimum and maximum front setbacks? Alder Hanira?
I just had a question. Is University Avenue the only place that's going to have the MU Avenue mixed use?
Quite
area?
likely, we haven't, the map is the next step after we finish the zoning text. We want to get the language in place before we go through the map exercise in a major way. So, but that's the intent. The thinking behind it is to focus on the University Avenue corridor where we have this issue with the varied setbacks, the varied lot lines.
Why do I remember a discussion of Allen Boulevard having?
Well, there could be some there too, but I think that's, the point is our approach with this was to make sure that we have enough zoning classifications to deal with the potential circumstances all around the city. It's much easier to remove a zoning district from consideration than it is to go back afterwards and add one. We actually had a couple other zoning districts proposed that we did remove from consideration because it just was getting to be a lot. We may still find that we want to consolidate based on your input and then the public hearing process, that we consolidate some of our zoning districts together. But I'm not saying we recommend that, but there are changes like that. It's much easier to tinker with ones that are proposed as opposed to have a blank slate. So.
And also included in the packet was the conversion
Yeah,
table
right,
for
yeah.
the zoning ordinance. So that looks at the future land use map and the comp plan, which I think does have it's called avenue mixed use in the flu map.
Right.
That is shown, I believe, on parts of Allen Boulevard. But you can see in the conversion table, what is being proposed is for that flu map for avenue mixed use, that could either be MUA or MUU. Those would be the two new districts that would best align with the future land use map.
A lot of this will depend on looking at parcel by parcel basis, how deep a lot is, how well the lot fits to the different parameters. And we just, it's premature to get into all those details at this point.
Okay. So
Soon.
moving on to number 3.
Downtown zoning district purpose statement. Vanderwall asked us if there should be language about certain properties within this district to emphasize the desire to retain existing traditional Main Street characteristics. And so the response was to have this purpose statement that you see in the green text. And also to do create a downtown historic overlay district design guidelines and add the overlay to the zoning map. Presume this one was pretty straightforward.
Any comments, Alder Hanira?
I had a question. How would you define traditional Main Street characteristics?
Yeah.
It talked about wood and brick. There was some, that might have been later on. There was some actual.
It just strikes me as a term that is very subjective, and so it probably
It
Yeah.
is.
benefit from.
I think somebody's taken away a lot of the historic district from down there.
Mhm.
I do know there is national standards, like there's like a Main Street America or something like that. And then like Strong Towns is also a more focused on like Main Street development. So they do have like certain design guidelines and stuff that we can follow as well. The only issue is that sometimes if you just follow that, it's like copy and pasting, another community to our community. So, but there are certain design guidelines that a lot of people follow, such as like the 0 lot line, design and construction.
In the previous number 2 or number 1, you identified some characteristic. Might be helpful because this is very ambiguous as it stands now with just those quoted words. It's meaningless. So parentheses such as,
Right.
or foot or site, a dock, something that would show there
So-
are standards.
Thank you for that. I'm working with you, so I don't mean to cut you off, but in
just did.
part 2, number 5, other land use design standards, which is page 56. Not the actual number in the corner, but the thing.
Mhm.
It says the existing design standards, blah, 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 blah. it says, it talks about facade. It talks about, is this the right one? There was
Yeah,
one.
proposed downtown historic overlay design standards require materials that are predominantly brick, stone, or wood.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I see it there, but maybe
Is that
even
the
just a
right page?
reference to that, to
Yeah.
the previous, because
So
this
I
comes
think-
after that's mentioned.
Right. I think that's what happened is I bet you they were writing them and then they forgot to cross-reference.
Yes, that's right.
Did you want to
This
add
is the
anything?
academic part of me.
I love it.
I just want this part to be clear when the first reference to a term
Thank you.
So
should
that
be
then
where
it
you
follows.
identify the term and you clarify it.
All right.
Then you can use fam mixed, rural, whatever.
All right.
Point 3 does have a second point in green, which is to create a downtown historic overlay district design guidelines and add the overlay to the zoning map
That's where it is. Yeah.
to cover
Is
it
that where
right there.
to define what our vision of Main Street characteristics is?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is all good feedback. We will-
Alder Schaefer, did you have any more since I cut you
No,
off?
that's fine with it. I just had that concern with the clarity.
I think it was good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did, especially since it's your district.
You know,
I want to make sure y'all are happy over there.
I
All
can't tell you
right.
how many term papers I've read, you writing all kinds of notes and then you get to the third page, you realize the answer is too late. And you already.
Okay, so with that, that was number 3. Was an excellent, catch. So thanks for that. Any other comments? Moving on to number 4.
Thank you, Mayor. Permitted uses for industrial districts. Really a good way to introduce this topic is we've had over the years a number of requests to add limited services in our industrial park, our Middleton Business Park specifically. That's what's zoned industrial. And we had a former commissioner who cautioned us about this as well, that pretty soon you might end up watering down your industrial district and not have enough locations anymore for true industrial uses. And so what we are proposing as a response is to Vanderwall proposed having multiple industrial districts categorized by light, medium, and more intense high industrial. And then in green, as you can see, the idea of separating personal and professional services and indoor sales and service uses are permitted by conditional use instead of as a permitted use, making sure that there are standards for limiting how much of these non-strictly industrial uses are permitted in our industrial zoning district. So that's the history here. The second part is the allowing personal storage facilities, mini storage units, which aren't very well defined in our current zoning ordinance, into our medium and heavy districts. I said high earlier, I meant to say heavy. So that's the history here. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like us to consider. Pretty straightforward.
Having been involved in some of those decisions and conversations, I felt it was less a percentage issue than it was what is required in terms of signage, parking,
Right.
access, lights and things for when you're bringing people into an industrial district. And so, somehow something that would word, instead of saying 25%, said that it would be allowable for things that did not take away from the general concept of what is stated for those kinds of districts. And I mean, that's vague in itself, but the percentage just seemed a little strange to me that
You prefer a ratio?
they're not the same.
All right. Moving on. Funny.
But,
Funny. Yeah, Alder Hanira.
no, I think we should allow them in there. I just felt that 25% was a little artificial. But that's okay.
I had a question about, it's on my screen, it's showing on the next page at the very top. The part, referencing the personal storage facilities are only permitted in, and one of them is the airport zoning district. My question is that, does that indicate that it is permissible for the lessees of the hangars at the airport to store anything other than their aviation related equipment? Because it was my understanding that under our assurances, they can't use those hangars as personal storage.
That's a good question. The assurances do allow storage that is ancillary to the aircraft storage issue, but because an aircraft has a shape, obviously, that allows storage around it, you can't have a hangar and just use it for storage space. That's the bottom line. But if there is storage, which does happen in our hangars where people store other items, a boat or something else that's ancillary to the aircraft, that's permitted. I actually don't know specifically why Vanderwall recommended that these facilities be located or be allowed here, but it would be as a conditional use permit. And obviously we would want to allow it in a way that encumbers the function of the airport, which is the first priority.
I would recommend double checking those assurances, because my recollection from watching many years of meetings is that there was an issue with people storing more than airplanes. And sometimes there was an airplane in there, but they were still storing other stuff, and it was inconsistent. And for that reason, we came up with a requirement to have an annual inspection, which I don't think has been done. So I would double check that.
Are you thinking about asking for this part to be struck? Is that where you're going with this?
Well, if the
or just
airport
let it be
zoning
vague
district
and-
coincides, is 100% the airport, then I would consider taking that out.
Yeah.
If it's inconsistent with our.
Or is it that
Assurances.
other, cities have airport districts, and then there's maybe sometimes a, storage facility next to it, and therefore it's that area? Can you clarify?
I'll find out. In Alder Janeiro, I used to staff the airport commission, so I went through a lot of those discussions. We did have issues where a couple of people did not store aircraft, and that was the main concern. But I'll look into the details here and report back to you on why that was recommended and what the implications are.
Thank you.
Yep.
I don't think that the personal storage facilities or mini warehouses really do provide much for the city, so to me, limiting them to the other districts seems more appropriate to me, keeping it out of the airport district so that the airport can function, as such.
I'm perfectly fine with that. This wasn't even something I focused on, so.
Yeah.
Thank you for that feedback. Moving on to number 5, minimum front-loaded garage setback for residential land uses.
Currently, there's no requirement for garage setbacks. This is actually an example of where the template that Vanderwall has used in other communities we felt was not the best fit. And so the work group provided a suggestion to allow front garages to extend up to 5 feet forward of the house. The idea here is to avoid snout houses, the term that's used with that sort of derogatory term. But the idea is that the best face of the house isn't the garage, but the front door. And so the work group's response was to have an allowance, but not have it be extreme. So have no more than 5 foot forward of the front facade. So the proposed definition here for single family and 2-family zoning districts is to have the 5 foot forward of the front plane of the principal structure. And then furthermore, all front loaded garages in residential zoning districts shall comprise no more than 50% of the width of that facade from left to right. How do you all feel about that?
I'm wondering why the work group wanted to encourage snout houses.
They're not encouraging it. I think they're providing more flexibility.
But the proposal from Vanderwall would have eliminated them.
Right.
I believe the discussion at that time was because, there are a lot of houses where they have the garage kind of pushed forward and then they have a porch space in front of their house. And so I think that was what the work group had discussed. Like, we want to encourage, the porch space and having people interact, on the street. And I think that was at least something that was discussed at the work group, was having, something like that.
Could the front plane of the house be defined to include the porch? Because I know it's excluded.
It could be.
Real snow.
Well, I'm just
If they have
thinking,
a 6 or 8 foot porch and then you're allowed 5 feet in front of that.
yeah, but I'm just thinking if the assumption, or if the reason for allowing that 5 foot setback is so that people can have a porch, but then people don't do the porch and we haven't achieved what we were hoping to do. Is this really the way to go? I also wondered why the different standards for the single family and two family versus multifamily. Like, is that equitable?
I'll have to look into that again.
The discussions at the work group, if I remember correctly, Mark, we were concerned about placing too many restrictions on single family owners. So there's obviously it gets to be a little bit touchy when people are talking about their own home and having it designed and built for them and what they want to have happen. And so we were trying to provide a little bit more flexibility there. I agree that we don't want to encourage projected garages. That's as a design standard. I don't think that's a good one. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we have lots that are buildable, that people can get what they want on them. And I don't feel that strongly about it if others feel that this is workable with a 2-foot setback. I'm okay with that as well.
Well, and when I was suggesting including the front porch as part of the front plane, it wasn't to keep the 5-foot setback. It was to reduce that or eliminate it.
Or eliminate that.
You
Yeah,
know,
it can't
but-
extend beyond what a porch would be.
Well, I think one of the pushes in the rezoning was to allow for smaller lot sizes in some of the residential areas so that we don't keep expanding outward more and we get more new development that's tightly packed, more like the older development districts were in downtown. And when we reduce the lot sizes, we then also reduce the ability to have garages that are facing front. So unless we've got alleyways, it becomes difficult to get everything onto one lot. And I think having that, I'm not sure where the 5 feet came from, but allowing some front to back flexibility allows the houses to be more tightly packed. And I think that's one of our overarching goals in our larger comprehensive plan that this zoning was trying to address in the larger picture too. You know, if we're looking at like how many feet specifically, you know, the bucket width of a land mover is 4 feet. So typically when you try to make a cost-effective plan, you would do a 4-foot or an 8-foot. You would do things in increments of the width of a bucket because it's cheaper to scoop that way.
Okay, so thank you for that, Commissioner Erdman. I agree, especially as we're looking at infill projects. The one thing I was hoping, and this might be more for when it goes, to council for consideration. Now that I'm becoming very good at zoning, I'm catching on to all these things. But this would have been one I could have used a picture for, like, what does that look like? Just, because I was trying to imagine it in my head. So that would be my only recommendation. And maybe it's in the bigger one and I just didn't see it. Alder Hanira?
I was just going to follow up and ask, I don't think I got an answer to my question about why are there different standards applying to multifamily? And I would appreciate a picture.
I heard Commissioner Bruce say that I think that the work group was recognizing that single family and duplex owners had the desire to have some more flexibility. But I mean, Randy, I forgot how you answered that, but that was basically what you said. We actually had a whole, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're just concerned about imposing too many restrictions on people that might be designing a home for themselves, perhaps. And I know how people can get when it's their own property.
I feel like they should be the same standard. I mean, because I'm trying to picture a multifamily building, maybe in the back, there's green space, community space. So why would we mind if they have a now multifamily house?
I'll answer it another way. So currently, we don't do design review for single family and 2-family dwelling units, but we do for multifamily because those are commercial buildings. So I think the direction that is shown in green is consistent with what we've done in the past. That doesn't mean I have no objection going back to the Vanderwall template either. But I think we were recognizing what our tradition has been and what the community expectations likely are, as based on the feedback that we got from work group members. And again, this is all subject to review and public input. So a picture, we'll certainly get you a picture. We can flag this for further discussion with, highlight this with the community.
I guess I'm just thinking in terms of the residents of these units, and it seems like there's an equity issue in saying people who can afford a single family home can have it one way and people who live in apartments have it another way. That's all.
Fair enough.
I think that there's also a difference in the type of construction and the type of lot that you have. With the multifamily construction, you have stacked land use, you have stacked buildings with units one on top of each other, and you have a straight lot, and that lends itself to a straight up and down facade with one parking garage. But with our neighborhood designs, we have curved streets, and we don't have lots that are all a rectangle. So we get pie shapes and wedge shapes and access to the lot. Like, I'm on a cul-de-sac. I have a very narrow access to my lot, right? It's very difficult to fit a garage on. I don't park in my garage. My car doesn't fit. So that's a difference. And then we also don't want every house to look like a box sitting there with no interest in the facade features, because it all has to be in a straight line. I mean, it's a different type of building. It's not about equity. If they get 5 feet more garage, no, it's about fitting it to the lot and the, yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank
that's
you.
It's
Alder
just
Schaefer.
to clarify, in residential lots, the setbacks still apply. So if you want your garage to stick out further, what it means is your house is going to go back further. My only really concern is if you have things sticking out, that you have unevenness, your neighbor has to look at your garage because it sticks out, but that's not the case here. And it seems to me it's to leave it within residential property, that as long as you've got adequate setbacks, that we shouldn't be telling people what to do with their houses.
All right. Well, I look forward to pictures because maybe I'll figure out this equity issue, and I want to make sure we're always being fair. So yes.
Yeah, sorry. Before we
Commissioner
move on to the next item, I do want to just talk about the maximum 50% of front-loaded garages, because that will impact lot widths, or it could impact lot widths if we have front-loaded garages rather than alley-loaded garages.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, I was one of the ones that proposed this 50%, but I want to make sure that that's well flushed out and others agree. Because, if you get if somebody wants a 2-car garage and it's at a minimum 20 feet or 24 feet is more reasonable, you're talking about a house that must be at least 48 feet wide plus the side yards. So now we're starting to impact lot widths in that.
See this picture.
Yeah.
So I suggested that we look at Amherst briefly. I mean, we're not talking about specific properties. These are just illustrative of the concept. So many of these, the garage sticks forward a few feet, probably no more than 5 feet in most cases. Obviously, the one that we're looking at here is more than 50% left to right.
Yeah.
I think most of us would agree this is an attractive neighborhood, attractive construction. What makes it attractive is various features of the house, architectural, variation to the plane of the
Something
house.
that Commissioner Henire said that I liked,
What's that?
and I see it here, is that the idea, if you allow for the porch to be considered the front of the house, part of the structure, but then you restrict the garage that it can't come beyond the front of the structure, it would accommodate all of these, because every one of these has a porch that at least visually comes out to the front of the garage. And I kind of like that is perhaps a better way to think of it than trying to say 5 feet or 3 feet or 10 feet.
Well, and even the minimum 2-foot setback for the garage, because all these, the porches, or almost all these, the porches are proud of the garage.
Just spin around.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank
Yeah,
you
but
to both of you.
having the porch as part of the structure, and the garage shouldn't stick out past the porch, or something like that.
And again, not to pick on anyone in particular, but the street actually gives us both examples.
Mhm.
So here you mainly see the garages.
And see, there's a house I drive by on a bus every day that's like that, back to that blue one. And it's a duplex and both doors are smashed in a little corner right behind that garage. And it just, to me, it seems so unfriendly and unlivable.
Well, those were different times.
At different
Things
times,
were
I know, I know.
popular, so
Just,
Yeah, I guess that's
we
where
will-
my question comes in, because my neighborhood is a good example of a lot of houses that would already be out of code for this. I
That's
think
what I
my
was thinking.
neighbor's garage probably extends a good 18 feet, if I'm estimating,
Yeah.
beyond the front. So I'm just, and someone who had to go through the variance process when, with our house, having already been just to touch our existing garage, we were already out of code for side yard setbacks. So that's my only comment, is worrying how much that will impact neighborhoods like mine with a lot of 1950s houses that were built out of code.
And would those be grandfathered in? Is that
Yes.
what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything that is built in its current form would be considered legally grandfathered in.
But if they went to touch it, like bring, their living room forward, I don't know, 6 feet or something, and they were still, they would have to then be,
Or if their house
apply to the
were
existing code.
damaged in a storm.
Yeah,
If they had
that's,
to
Or
rebuild.
get an
We're gonna-
exemption or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's all addressed in our non-conforming section. And I think we're probably going a
Awesome.
little,
I
yeah.
think that's
Okay.
further on, because I
Yeah.
remember that one.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
question, though. I like the curiosity. Number 6 is incentives for affordable housing and stormwater management. And I know that Commissioner Summers was interested in the stormwater, because I wrote her a note so that she would keep an eye on it. So
Yeah.
Mark, take it away.
Sure. So obviously our comprehensive plan, one of the major components of it is housing affordability, and also it's just generally a concern of the city over the years, elected officials. So we've, working with Van Dwolf, created new incentives for affordable housing stormwater management. Specifically, letter A below is what we went with. That's what's in the draft ordinance based on work group feedback. I'm going to read all of this, but yes.
I had a question on the next page, I think it is item 1C. Well, it's the part that says the work group response, like the idea, but instructed city staff and Vanderbilt to, no, wait, now I'm missing that one. It's the one above it. Work group response, like the idea, but requested that city staff gather further feedback from the Affordable Housing Committee. I think that means the Workforce Housing Committee. And
Right.
did that follow up take place?
It has not yet. So that's something we're flagging for them.
Okay.
So as we release this and have the draft, it's going to be referred to various committees. So we will go through that process.
Okay.
This is one of those, it's kind of a catch-22. We've been working on this for a while. It was, we got some input on very specialized components of it from various, water resources management, for example. But we internally at the staff level obviously wanted to bring this to you a while ago, and here we are. So there will be plenty of opportunities to delve into some of these topics for each committee that has the jurisdiction.
And then on B, the stormwater management. So this one, I mean, I love the idea of offering incentives. Kind of seems like gaming the system. Just my initial reaction. I do like the idea of adding an energy incentive. And it sounds like you'll take that to the sustainability committee to think about.
Looks like it.
What would you do if let's say we go with an energy incentive and stormwater management incentive? Each one has a story associated with it. What would you do if a developer wants to do both? Is a 2-story increase acceptable? I don't know.
I think when the work group discussed this, what initiated the conversation was, right now we have some flexibilities with PUDs to try to encourage, sustainable design and so forth, because it's a flexible negotiated zoning. We're not going to have that anymore, but we do still want to encourage those kinds of treatments, right? So I think the stormwater management was one of the ones that was thrown out as an idea, but I totally agree with you. It could be energy efficiency. It could, my personal feeling is that there's a maximum of one story. You can get it either with affordable housing, you can get it with energy efficiency, or you can get it with stormwater management, or maybe some combination. I don't know how we would do that, but.
And I also think if one, these incentives would have to be really well defined. So exceeding 100% of, or, exceeding our stormwater requirements by how much? Is 1% more sufficient, or are we trying to push for more? So further definition is needed.
Excellent. Any other discussion on that?
I just wanted to, going back to where we kind of sidetracked on item 1, which should be discussed in here for stormwater management. I just wanted to clarify that I can't remember who suggested the green roof requirement. Was that a requirement suggestion for downtown, or a
Highly recommend, maybe?
I just wanted to clarify, because coming from the commercial architect's perspective and having run into this situation professionally, when it comes to green roofs, there are a lot of things to take into consideration as far as access. It can sometimes per code push you up an additional story, and we've talked a lot about limiting height of buildings. So I just wanted to make sure that we were thinking about it in that term, so it wouldn't, potentially discourage development downtown if that came into play.
And that's a really good point, because if we want to have a green roof and it's a usable green roof and they take an elevator up there and staircases, we could have another floor, which I don't think is what the intent of our zoning code would be. That wouldn't be counted as a story, but.
I'm all for sustainability. So if we can get green roofs and encourage it, I just didn't want to make it a requirement. So
I think that's a really good point, and I'm glad you're reminding us about the height, because I think that was also part of that definition that Commissioner Erdman Hermans was helping me read on page 56. I think it talked about height too, that it wanted to make sure it was no more than like 2 stories taller than the next one or something, if I remember right. So keep an eye on that, because then that plays into your height as well. So glad we're thinking through things. All right, number 7.
Approach to mixed use land uses. 2 different types proposed, distinction between them being a mixed use building, maximum 25% for vehicle parking and access, minimum 50% non-residential, and then live work buildings. Our Vanderwall team was asking what we thought of this approach. Ultimately, the proposal in the draft will be that each mixed use district allows multifamilies are permitted by right land use if the property is not located at the intersection of 2 streets. And then the second bullet was not made, that change was not made because it didn't make sense after making the other changes noted in 7C. That's a little convoluted, but anyway, the issue here is we wanted to promote mixed use, especially at intersections, but we didn't want to be, prescribing something that maybe the market couldn't always bear out. So we're trying to be flexible here. Randy, did you want to add to that?
I totally agree. Today's presentation on the Greenway development was a good example. I thought as a mixed use development, it turned out very successful, I thought. But if you looked at the amount of commercial space they had on that floor versus the entire floor area, it's nowhere near 33%. So we may have to look at that percentage a little bit. I think what we're really getting at is that we have an activated street or an activated corner that has usable commercial space in it. And I don't know if it becomes a square footage or if it becomes a linear footage of front face or street face. But the percentage, I think, might still be a problem, even though you've reduced it.
If you go down, please. And you're alluding to the 33% on the next page, the second area of green text there underlined.
Yeah.
And this was something, Randy, that we were proposing after you gave us some feedback, but I had called you about it just to see what your reaction was. So I would think it'd be difficult to state a certain minimum because it all depends on the scale of the project.
Yeah.
So a percentage seems the right way to go, but as you said, the goal here is to activate the corner and still maintain some flexibility.
Right.
Any other feedback?
May I ask, should standards before that underlined part, should that be land uses or is standards the? Because it refers to non-residential
I
land
see what
uses
you mean.
earlier. Also, the green bullet at the top that says this change was not made because a comprehensive plan amendment would be required. But we're amending the comprehensive plan now, so change whatever the changes on the previous page to
accommodate mixed uses.
Yeah. and all
Yeah, we
permitted by
could.
right in all multifamily zoning districts. Why not make the change now that we're doing the comp plan amendment?
So in other words, just modifying the definition of the multifamily category to state that mixed use buildings are also permitted in this district. To allow
Makes
that.
sense. I'm just thinking, because if you have like, say,
Yes.
I'm
And
thinking
live work
something like
buildings.
Allen Boulevard that has already 10 apartment buildings and condos all along Allen. If something was going up and they wanted to put something in, like something.
And would this then, I take that to mean that on Allen, if one of the existing properties that's a multifamily use could also convert to commercial use. Portions of it could convert to commercial use.
Might be good if we're trying to encourage that walking neighborhood, hop off the bus, grab some coffee or a baguette and keep going.
And what specifically is non-residential land use? I mean, so the building we looked at today that we postponed the zoning, you know, it has not a lot of residential units, but it has a lot of space taken up with the lobby into residential places and rec rooms and gym rooms. We've seen a lot of buildings that minimize commercial. So they don't have a lot of living spaces, but they do have things that are not commercial. So I'm not clear what that means when you say non-residential uses. I mean, to me, that begs the question, the percentage 50 versus 35. We've seen a lot of units going where they put the smallest, tiniest little coffee shop in the corner to corner. So, oh yeah, we're mixed use when, and then the rest of the space is filled up with lobbies and other things. I don't know if that, you know.
Fair.
You define a lobby space to an apartment building. Is it residential use or is it not?
Or the parking area of the
Yeah.
building we just saw, is that considered residential if it's residential parking, but not if it's commercial? Right?
But I would just like a little more clarification on exactly what you mean, because somebody starts dividing up the percentages, a lot of ways they can categorize what they're counting in each percentage.
That makes sense, because I don't think we would want a lobby and a fitness facility that are not open to the public, that are only for use by the residential use above to count
Yeah,
for
but
mixed
then they can
use.
say, well, nobody's living in this space, so it's not really residential.
Right.
space.
Yep.
Good feedback.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Very good. Number 8, tourist rooming houses / short-term residential rentals.
Basically, what our response to the state law that saying we must permit them in all residential dwelling units is we are recommending the adoption of the requirements imposed by the city of Madison. And so those are in 5 bullets here. I'm not going to read them all.
I have a question. Do property owners need approval from HOAs or their condo associations in order to
Or I
rent
guess,
out their space?
yeah, I was gonna say, what's the state, does the state
Yeah, I
law
don't-
have any framework on this?
It says here under second bullet, are permitted for owner occupiers if explicitly permitted within the lease or condo association. Alder Haniro, does that get at your? So I guess the inference I get from that is that if it's not allowed, then there could be some non-city related regulation that's outside of the city's jurisdiction.
Yeah, I know typically with like HOAs and condos, if they have more strict rules, like we have some HOAs that only allow 4-foot tall fences instead of 6-foot tall fences. And, if there comes a time when they have an issue, the city defers to the HOA. So, if a homeowner wants a 6-foot tall fence and they say, oh, the city allows 6-foot tall fences, we go, sorry, your HOA doesn't, so we typically defer to that.
That makes sense.
But you don't do that with like solar installations, do you?
Yeah, well, it's up to, we just have it as the HOA has to, they have to, do the compliance, basically. The city, we don't do compliance on that. So we allow, solar on all properties, but it's up to the HOA to do the compliance. So, in the case of the 6-foot fence, we do allow the fence. But then if the HOA comes by with the compliance, then they have to comply with the 4-foot. So, yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I understand, if I was to have a second home, which I do not, and I said, I want to Airbnb my residence, I would only be able to do it 180 days of the year while they're in it. Is that accurate?
That sounds right.
Because I wouldn't be there. And then if I wanted to do a room in my house, then, and I'm there, then it's throughout the year, but just, you have to 1 to 6 days per person. Okay.
So how do you take someone like university professor who goes on a 9-month sabbatical? And they don't exactly have a different residency, but somebody comes in and may even just be an in-kind, you watch the house, you're there, but you're now living in my house for 9 months. There's no way you could do that under the way this is written, because it says 1 to 6 days if it's your primary resident.
At some point you're renting out your house and it's not a short-term rental. I understand your question, but
Yeah.
it's not like people are coming and going, moving in and out all the time.
No.
Is that more a 1-year lease that maybe gets cut short?
Yeah,
That would probably fall more under.
Yeah, okay, but so specifically just related to short terms.
yeah, because they tend to have, and we have had some complaints, including fairly recently, where people are concerned about all the coming and going of different people in the neighborhood every couple of days. So that's really what we're trying to get at here.
And we've heard the same for interns. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
I just didn't see 180 days. as
Interns
short-term,
looking
that's
for
what's confusing.
housing. So that would cover the interns, but
Yeah, yeah.
when you get to 9 months, that's then you're just getting towards that 1 year. But I'm glad you're bringing up that there are some concerns. I've heard some. So hopefully this will at least provide some framework for that.
I have
I
a
have
question.
Licenses. Do they have, real quick, Commissioner Erdman, so they don't have to have licenses right now. Is that accurate?
We refer them to the Dane County, Dane County Public Health,
Okay.
but we don't, the city doesn't regulate them separately.
I appreciate it.
Except for in the context of if they are, if what's being rented is an accessory dwelling unit that if it doesn't comply with other standards in our ordinance, then we would have jurisdiction over that. But yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Erdman Hermans?
Yeah, I was actually just wondering about the licensing. So is that something that the city then is going to set its own standards and operate a licensing for short-term rentals?
Yes, it's in our draft. I don't have all the details up and memorized. It was a few months ago I worked on this part, but yes, there's certain standards for that listed.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so moving on to number 9, and I thought of you, Alder Haniro, when I was reading it, electric vehicle charging. I'm sure the rest of you all are also excited to hear more, but this is our favorite topic. So can you tell us, staff, more about this?
Sure. So as drafted, these are permitted as an accessory land use in all zoning districts with no minimum requirements. Madison had recently adopted some required minimums, but that has been challenged. What we are recommending is shown in red text at the top of this page. To modify the accessory land use to mirror Madison's requirement for minimum 10% of off-street parking. To read all this. Yeah, so that's where we are going with this.
I should probably clarify, my other favorite topic is biking. So I know that was brought up before. So here we go. Commissioner Hanairo, did you have any thoughts?
I was just going to comment on question B above what's showing on the screen. It asks, should we simply allow them everywhere or require them in certain instances? And I say both.
Excellent insight. Yeah. I think the only thing I'm learning about the EVs is that sometimes they have different adapters. So if there is a preferred type, I heard that some of them have different adapter types. So just make sure that we are thoughtful.
And what constitutes EV ready? In my mind, that would be providing the appropriate power, probably 220 to each parking stall. And then I would say the car owner would have to get the appropriate adapter.
Is that what it is?
Well, I
Yes.
don't know, but that's how I would think about it.
Yeah, as an EV owner, yes.
Yeah.
Adapter falls on the owner's responsibility.
All right. Well, look at me, I'm learning.
Complete with your own meter and everything.
We're going to keep busy. So any other questions? Okay. Moving on to number 10, permitted vertical projections into required yards. This one, I think I needed a little help with a picture as well. I wasn't quite sure what it was trying to say.
Yeah, I was actually looking up, I was going to find a spot in our ordinance, but I didn't find it in time. So as drafted, we have vertical projections being permitted to extend beyond the required setback if they are within the building envelope. So there's things like bay windows, and at the roof line, there might be some, and actually, Randy, you're probably better able to speak to this than I am. It's architectural, but what we are saying is all applications for projections must demonstrate that no solar rights of existing solar panels and neighborhood properties are negatively affected by the addition of the by the addition on the winter solstice.
Does this say that if two-story buildings built, the second floor, there could be a projection only on the second floor that might be a couple of feet, and that would be allowed? Assuming that the solar study.
Oh, okay.
I'm with you, Mayor. I didn't quite understand totally what that vertical projections meant.
Yeah.
So I think some clarification there would be good.
That would be good, because the first question I had is a tree considered a vertical? I mean,
No,
not
it's
related to
still-
building, but it made me think,
4-foot wide chimney going.
yeah, but it made me wonder, so what if my neighbor wanted to plant a tree in the backyard and it's going to shade my solar panels? Do I have any recourse? But that's not what we're talking about.
You know, let me give you more information about this one again. I'm sorry, right now I'm drawing a blank as to exactly where this was. I know that we talked about this, that we wanted to make sure that we didn't allow construction that had a negative impact on the adjoining property owner. I'll get back to you on that, sorry.
What building would you allow outside of the setback?
Pardon me?
What building would be allowed outside of the setback that would be a vertical building?
What? So there are, it's common for zoning ordinances to allow encroachments into a setback area, like a bay window or, you know, in a commercial case, an awning or something, as long as it's not, in fact, our current zoning ordinance allows eaves up to a certain distance to encroach. So that's what this is getting at. I I was trying to find exactly in this code where it addresses that and,
But horizontal as opposed to vertical.
Or just remove the word vertical.
well, let me,
Yeah, the vertical is what's confusing.
Yeah, that's what's confusing.
Oh, yeah, that.
all right,
that is
I'm
good
sorry,
point.
right
Okay.
now I'm,
Okay.
that
You'll-
wasn't
you'll
one I
work on
focused
this.
on before this meeting. I should have.
It's okay. There are like
It's-
21 things, so
it's
we
all right.
can just keep moving on. We'll
Fine.
circle back another day on.
This is number 11 is a bigger topic. We've really been struggling with this at the staff level, and I think Randy, we had quite a bit of discussion with the work group too. We're getting some pushback to the idea of requiring step backs for buildings that are a certain height. Actually, that was a meeting before I came here. That wasn't this meeting. Meetings blur together sometimes. So Middleton Center, as an example, has the upper floor, or Middleton Station next to Capitol Brewery has the fifth floor stepped back a little bit. It looks great. It's a way to soften the overall mass of the building, especially adjacent to residential, a use that might not have the same height. But at the same time, we've heard from prospective developers that imposing that type of a change changes the constructability or the ease of construction or the cost of construction. Randy, you can speak to that better than me, but there's been this tug of war of whether this is a good thing to do or not. And should we require this for all facades or just the part, stepped back from the adjoining single family residence? Then I think the other thought I had recently is, well, what if the building already has a pretty big setback from the property next door? It's not right up against it. Maybe we should have an allowance for that. University Avenue comes to mind here, as that redevelops. So I guess I was hoping we could have a few minutes of discussion on this, recognizing it's getting close to
I
night.
know that when we were working on the design standards for University Avenue, we talked specifically about those because we've got some high density uses that are proposed on University Avenue that directly abut single family to the back.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we had this transition. How City of Madison does it, they take a required rear yard setback and they say that you're allowed to have, I think, 2 stories at that rear yard setback, and then it can go up from 45 degrees from there. So it kind of takes your
Proximity.
Yeah, the proximity. So if you're far enough away, maybe a setback isn't required. I think in the downtown district, I think the step backs, I think in that overlay district would be very appropriate because we've got issues of scale there, smaller buildings, and I think that would be very good. University Avenue, I don't think, I think on the back side, I think it's important. On the front side, I don't think the step back's necessarily important. But there may be areas where we would want to have a step back at 3 or 4 stories above. As my profession as an architect, we did a lot of buildings with step backs. They are harder. They undoubtedly cost more money, but at the same time, it's a very effective tool to mitigate the building's height and to promote a more pedestrian scale. So.
Okay. Any other?
I was only thinking with University Avenue, as you get towards the house, towards your district, would be the only time I would think about a transition, like a small transition area. But the rest for university, I'm fine. Except the back would make sense because you do bump up into some. But I think there's a lot of great things that we can do, and we can be open to just the standards for the most part. But when we get close to those single family homes and transition, that might be just a good buffer. So it's.
I think that's a good point. As you get very close to Park Street, you maybe a 5-story building there would feel, without a step back, might feel
Yeah, I'm intrigued by your 45% thing, and maybe one of the issues is instead of saying like at 2 stories, you're saying if you're abutting a residential or something, at the point you reach the height of the residential next to it, then you've got to start your setbacks at that height. So if you have a 2-story house, that's different than a 1-story house. But that somehow when you exceed that limit of the neighborhood standard house size, you got to start the setback. I don't know. But yeah, not for everything, just transition.
It's very good and thoughtful. I appreciate you guys bringing that to us. Any other comments on that? Okay.
Well, one comment that I would have is the first building that turns over, that makes a lot of sense for it, but the building next to it, when it turns over, it won't have that same setback requirement then, right? If we're looking at areas that are going to gentrify entirely over time, it becomes an unequal burden to the first developer.
I mean, if it happens to have a single family as it's really would.
Yeah, like along University Avenue, for example, there's still these mixed areas, right?
But it would be, I took that to mean the zoning district, if it was a zoned single family versus, we could perhaps have a single family use in a mixed use district. That side yard step back wouldn't be required in that case.
Right, but when you have an entire block or it's just totally almost what's now R1s or something, to create a zoning buffer around those as a transition type of zone that would target those areas that are primarily residential, that are next to places that are clearly going to start to go. Yeah, I think it is a burden to the developer, but they're also looking to develop in a place where it has a consequence to their neighbors. So that doesn't bother me.
Well, we do have to remember, though, that when we make something more expensive for the developer, that cost gets translated to the users of the building. So we make living there more expensive too, which is something that we also struggle with here.
Right, but then there's the cost of the person who lives next to it in their house that suddenly has a monolith next to them, and that's a cost too. It's not a monetary cost. That's a resale cost on their home, the value of their property, the value of their life. So I think you have to get broader on your sense of costs.
I don't know. I used to live on Atwood Avenue, and it was still is very mixed. Some gentrification of, very appealing modern brick buildings and a lot of old wood homes that are multi-unit and single family, and then also beautiful old homes by the lake. And we all seem to coexist just fine. And I think that's one of the lovely things about it. That's what mixed use is that you get more mixing. It's nice.
Yeah, I'm just talking buffer. I'm not talking about the whole district. And I'll respectfully disagree with you on my value, but that's okay.
Well, I like it when we agree to disagree, because it's not always easy, but I think everyone had some great insights, and thank you to Commissioner Erdman Hermans for keeping us and reminding us on affordability, and thank you to Alder Schaefer for reminding us that we have to respect the people who are single families and find that cohesive. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're walkable. And so let's just keep working together so that hopefully we can find that nice harmony. All right, Mark, I think we're on to 12.
Yeah.
All right.
This is a big one. Accessory dwelling units. Our comp plan has proposed that these be permitted by right as accessory land use in all single-family, two-family zoning districts, in addition to the mixed-use neighborhood district. They would also be permitted accessory conditional uses in the multifamily zoning districts. Our drafted requirements include maximum number of occupants, maximum size, which is 900 square feet, appearance standards, minimum parking requirements, etc. The working group felt this was a topic for Plan Commission and Council to discuss, so they didn't discuss this any further. So turning it over to you.
Wonderful. Do you want to maybe help us out, Commissioner Bruce, on any conversations you all had?
I honestly can't recollect us diving into this much at all.
Right.
Okay, so just so you know, I have been asked at outdoors about these kinds of things, that people were interested in having, especially detached garages converted like a second floor garage. It could be that the district that I represented before running for mayor, the lots were smaller. And because they were made often before the 50s, sometimes there were the separated garages, or they just had different structures, and say the rest of the city that might already have the mother-in-law suite all set up, or a good basement, because we also have floodplains. So there was interest in my district, but I had researched it, and Madison had only a handful, I think, since they went towards it. I want to say it was about 8. So it may seem like something people were talking about, but the actual creation of them may not be that high volume if we move forward. So
Yeah, it's problematic to me only that, I mean, we go back to the short-term rental, and you can't rent out a room short-term in your house, but you can build something in the backyard that essentially becomes a living space or a rental, and suddenly turns a single-family house into a duplex property or something, and a lot of things that happen to it. And I think that this is real messy, maybe. And yes, I think it needs more discussion, because I see lots of issues. You know, if I'm living next to somebody who suddenly they got their son living in the garage on top of it, it changes the whole character of what's going on.
But I think that, we want to give flexibility to increase densities,
Yeah.
including in the single family district. I know that if I had my druthers, I'd love to have an ADU on one of my children's houses. I mean, that would be a fantastic
Get them out
living
of the house.
arrangement for me. So I'm supportive of it, of the
Yeah.
idea, particularly if it doesn't become something that happens in 50% of lots. It's going to happen somewhat rarely.
If I may quickly, I think I'm going to mention a couple things that are in the draft in the code, just to help you get an idea of what we were thinking. So this would be defined as residential dwellings located directly above the ground floor of a building used for office, commercial, or institutional land use, or a residential dwelling unit located on the same lot as a single family dwelling unit, either in the same building or in a single family dwelling unit, either in the same building or in a detached building, is what I meant to say. Then there's various regulations. That was the definition. Regulations include the number of occupants shall not exceed 1 family plus 1 roomer or 2 unrelated individuals. There's a regulation pertaining to where the entrances are to be. They shall not be added to the front elevation of an existing building, but may be added to the side or rear. An ADU shall adhere to the principal setback requirements and standards. So in other words, you'd have to keep the character of the zoning district that you're in. You can't, that makes sense. Entryways within a rear or side yard shall be connected to a street frontage by a paved walkway or driveway. For an ADU that's located on the same lot as a single family dwelling unit, the following additional regulations apply. The ADU must be either the principal building or the ADU must be occupied by the owner of the property. The ADU shall not be owned separately from the principal dwelling. So one mortgage, one owner of the whole property. The maximum size of the ADU shall not exceed 75% of the principal dwelling's floor area, or up to a maximum size of 900 square feet. And that 900, I believe, is the Madison standard. The appearance or character of the principal building must not be significantly altered so that its appearance is no longer that of a single family dwelling. And then there's something about exterior finishes. This is not as, this gets into details. And then minimum required parking, 1 space or none if there is on-street parking available within the right-of-way directly adjacent to the property line. If there's no on-street parking available, then it refers to another section. So anyway, so it tries to address the issues. And I guess I wanted to go back to our comp plan and the thinking behind this. We have an affordable housing problem in the city. We have people who, and that includes people who maybe can't afford to stay in their house anymore either for various reasons. We have a lot of properties where there's a lot of space on the property that could be used for infill housing. It's a way to grow the city without growing out into farmland. And so I think those are the concepts that underlie why the ADU movement, not just in Middleton, but across the country is gaining a lot of favor.
Yeah.
Obviously, the regulations here are intended to still protect the character of what people associate as single family housing.
I have some comments. I'm strongly in favor of this because it's currently not allowed in the zoning, and allowing it has so many benefits, but allowing it with a code and ordinances means that we do have some control over it. And I think it's better to get on the front side of that than end up with like the previous problem of the planned development districts, where everything became kind of hodgepodge, right? So if we get in on the front side and create it the way that we want it to be with your regulations, then we can maintain the character of the neighborhood and of Middleton. Yeah, not just affordability, but just even access to care, right? When our parents get older and they need some more care, but aren't ready or don't have the means to be in a facility, they could be on site, but not in the house. And you've got neighbors around to help them. It's just, it does wonderful things for community. So I'm strongly in support of it. And I think it will become more necessary in the future. So I think it's a great idea that we start to offer it and end with regulation now with some forethought instead of afterthought.
Alder Schaefer.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I agree with Gretchen. My earlier comment wasn't saying I don't agree with the concept, but I think it's messy. And is it actually really a zoning issue? Because you're not gonna define a zone that allows this. It's a, what do you call it? It's some statutory requirements, but is it, help clarify this for me. We're talking about it because it's something that would be allowable. That's not restricted to a particular zone or zone type or anything. It would be allowed pretty much anywhere.
It would be allowed
within
single family, 2-family zoning districts and mixed use neighborhoods.
Okay, so it'd be like a conditional use in those zones.
Right. And I did want to clarify something that Gretchen just mentioned. It's not permitted by right currently in our zoning ordinance, but we do have language in section 10.23 that allows an ADU, essentially, it's not called that, but it's essentially what it is, as a conditional use, as long as it's limited to, it's not more than 500 square feet, and it has to be within the single family residence. It can't be detached, like you mentioned, Mayor, with a freestanding garage, for example, with that would not be allowed. And in our current code, it says, so those would be individually self-contained, their own bathroom, kitchen, sleeping area, etc. One of the units cannot be more than 500 square feet. One of the structures must be owner occupied. And there cannot be separate direct entrances. So it's similar to some of the language that I read earlier. The difference is we're allowing it to go up to 900 square feet. We're allowing it to be in a detached structure. We would be allowing it as a permitted use. By right.
So what is the action you're asking of us? Because this is in the comprehensive plan that ADUs should be included in the zoning. So I'm not clear on what.
Well, it's a significant, thank you for pointing that out. And in that sense, you're right. This is how we're going to implement, how we're proposing to implement the comprehensive plan. It still is a policy issue in the sense of we wanted to flag this for you. If there was any concerns you had about how we are proposing to regulate it. I guess in hindsight, what I should have done is just given you that excerpt from the code, but I just read it to you.
Right. That's what I was going to ask, because I'm more of a visual.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't think to do that. Yeah.
So, because I think I don't think there's an issue with ADUs being included. It's just how we would implement it. That's important, and we don't have access to that tonight.
Okay. Well, I'll circle back to you on that as well.
As a side note, I attempted to, I always said I would not talk too much, but in grad school, I was trying to rent one of these in Minneapolis, and the height was 5'5". And it turns out they didn't have a lot of demands, but it was in my price range. So I would hope that it would maybe have a minimum height standard, because Unfortunately, I said my boyfriend can't visit and they said, well, that's great. And I was like, so it turns out I was one of the few applicants who stayed long enough, but in the end, I did not take that one. But it was very affordable. But as people go and consider an ADU and they convert a garage, if we could just maybe make sure it's thank you, livable, that would be great.
Livable.
Whatever that would be. So George, I'm sorry, I was telling a story and I always promised I wouldn't talk much, but I'm getting tired, Mark. So I'm going to ask if we can, and I'm sorry to the rest of you all, but I'm going to ask if we can defer the second half to next time, unless there is an absolute interest in going on. Because I see that the next one is Code Part 2. Now, before I defer, can you just explain why Part 1 was Part 1 and Part 2 was Part 2?
If you go to my memo, second page.
Was that the last
So,
set?
Yeah, so the ordinance, because of its length, was divided into two parts, as indicated here.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
As shown on the screen, that the ordinance was divided into two parts because of its length. And so part 2 consists of performance standards, exterior building design standards, landscaping requirements, and then administration procedures, which we don't really need to talk about.
I appreciate that
So,
because of the duplicates of the downtown. And so I was trying to figure out, but now I see that's part of the exterior building discussion. I see. Thank you for that clarification. Yes.
Would you be comfortable with us deferring it 2 meetings ahead? We have a long agenda.
A robust one?
June
Yes.
13th meeting.
Would that be okay for
I
the
think it would be
27th?
great because it's long and we tire. we're
And we
not
want to
gonna
do
be
a good
effective.
job.
That's right.
Yeah, we want to do a good job. So the 27th
Yes.
would be wonderful. Do I need a motion for that or can we just?
No,
defer that?
you're giving feedback tonight. We weren't expecting you to make any motions. under
Okay,
this item,
right,
so
right.
It's fine.
Okay.
I do want to thank staff for all the efforts that they put in on this project. It's a
Oh, yeah.
big project,
It is a
very
big
big,
project.
and it's really going to be, quite useful moving forward. So thank you for the
Effort.
Oh,
Well, my 3
Wonderful.
colleagues and Kelly has helped and our city engineering, water engineer has helped. Thank you.
all right. With that, we're going to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
Art motion to adjourn.
Barb, do I have a second?
Summers second.
Summers, any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.